The voting's done in Zimbabwe, but now what? Results aren't expected for a week. So what can we expect in the coming days, and how much is at stake? Let's take an in-depth look at these issues. I'm joined by the economist Vivian Atut here in our Johannesburg studio, and from Harare we have Dr. Webster Zambara, an observer with the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation. Let me start off, firstly, welcome both of you. Let me start off with you, Dr. Zambara, because you've seen some discrepancies. In fact, an entire polling station that's gone missing. What happened there?
This is news that is still coming in, where we have reports of visuals of that polling station, and we are still getting the facts as to what exactly happened, and we are only going to get the final analysis as to the impact of that. But it is, I would say it is the bad scar in a largely peaceful environment that we were witnessing today in both rural and urban areas. So I would say at this point in time, I don't have the final facts. Let us wait and hear what has happened exactly at that blown out polling station.
Let's wait for the confirmation then. Vivian Atut, I mean, how damaging a story this sort of news is for Zimbabweans if it is indeed confirmed? Because I should imagine that what they need to know now is good news in order for the country to move forward.
Yes, I think everyone has been keeping their fingers crossed, Janet, to see that for once in a very long time, Zimbabweans can go to the polls, they can be able to come out and say that, yes, we had a credible elections. Yes, we had a fair elections. Yes, we can all look up to a future to say that, let all the parties say, whoever is the winner out of this came out of a system that was fair, that had no intimidation, and for the first time had no kind of direct forecast of who was going to win, like it has been in the long kind of Mugabe years. So stories like these are a little scary. I think we hope that they are not true, because if they are true, then the question now begins to surface. What is the scale of things like this? Was it just an isolated incident, or is it something that can be viewed across the country? Then it would really begin to bring worries to the future
of Zimbabwe. And we've seen in the past that possibly the reality has been hushed up in order for one party to succeed and for others to not succeed. So the fear factor is real, isn't it?
Yes, yes. I think the fear factor is real because Zimbabweans across the board have come from a history of over 37 years of a system where people have been intimidated, people have been brutalized. We've seen visuals, we've seen people hospitalized in instances of elections. And for the first time, Zimbabweans have begun to have some breather and say that we can go to the polls and say we want to choose who would lead us as a people of Zimbabwe in a fair and in a credible system. So if we begin to get stories like this, we hope, I think, following the elections all through the day, I think on a fair probability, one would say that we have heard stories from Harare, from Bulawayo, from other cities saying that things have been going smoothly. So we hope that things like this are isolated and can be dealt with all honesty, because there might be real issues, there might be technical issues. Zimbabwe has come from a system where the technology, the infrastructure, even putting together elections like this have been very difficult.
And we are waiting on the ZEC, the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission, to hold a press conference in the next hour or so. So we might get more clarity if there is indeed a problem of sorts. But Dr. Zambara, let's assume that the elections have gone off well. Well, they seem to have, and are deemed to be free and fair. What needs to be happening immediately?
I guess it has been free and fair up to now, but often we are now in the long wait, because the period between now and the final tallying and announcement of results would actually be the final loop in terms of how free and fair the elections have been, and also the reactions to the final result will also determine the peacefulness of the environment. But I should say, by and large, this has been a very peaceful election, both in the rural and urban areas, and I want to recognize the work that has been done by the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission that brought together all the political parties to sign a peace pledge. And as the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, we've been working with the Commission to try and make sure that we contribute to the peaceful environment. And also the politicians have done their duty, I think, to a large extent. We have had a very peaceful election season, but the period between now, which is the final night, and the day after, is the period that cannot be predicted, because at the moment the counting will start soon. The ballots have just been sealed, and the period that we are looking forward to is announcements of results, and then we will know what exactly transpired in the polling booths that we are going to see. Then the reaction of the politicians to the results that will be announced. So I would say
possibly be a good loser and who's going to be a good winner. Excuse me, jumping in there. Once we've done that, once we've dealt with that, Vivian, what needs to be done now to show a good and healthy economy in order to attract investors?
I think, Janet, that is the million-dollar question. What needs to be done? Irrespective of whichever candidate comes out victorious in this election, you have your hands full. You are dealing with an economy which basically has no stable currency of its own. They're using bond notes, they're using the US dollar, they're using all kinds of currencies.
A little earlier on, one of our correspondents, Eldrin, was showing us a picture, was painting a picture for us about the economy and the importance of the black market economy. I mean, that's a real problem, isn't it, if people look there first?
Yes, that is a real problem. Just telling you that the formal system has collapsed. So whoever is victorious, the government is in huge debt. The government infrastructure that needs to deliver services to the ordinary Zimbabweans, whether it's health services, education, has collapsed. Go to Zimbabwe, you stay in places where there is no water running for months, and the government has its hands full. From a policy point of view, from a regulatory point of view, you need to be able to tell investors that, I mean, we've heard all the candidates say, we want to be investor friendly. What does that mean? Are you going to show investors in terms of regulatory policies that will tell them if you bring your money into Zimbabwe, you are guaranteed to take it back? What kind of guarantees would you be issuing to these investors is what everyone out there is waiting to see. What kind of confidence you will give to the Zimbabwean people. The youth, Zimbabwe has over 50% unemployment rates. What will you tell the youth of Zimbabwe that this is how we're going to stabilize this economy to create jobs? The ordinary people in Zimbabwe who are looking for services, they want to go to hospitals, they want to be able to serve at municipalities. How will you build those municipal infrastructures?
Okay, let's listen to what some of the youth have had to say and what it is that they would like to see from an economic point of view. Let's just listen in to that.
Yeah, it's my first time. Yeah, it's just that we as young people, we're hoping for change. They have no jobs, so we believe that this time we're going to cast our votes. There's going to be a big change.
I'm hoping for the elections to be free, fair and credible. That's number one. Number two, I'm expecting the elections to usher in a new Zimbabwe. A new Zimbabwe that is good to live in.
There's nothing coming for the youth, isn't it? We can look in terms of employment, we can look in terms of even the education. What we are aiming as youth is nothing, especially on employment. As you can see, largest number of youths are in the road. They are selling juice cards, they are selling airtime, they are selling man-made shoes and all those stuff.
Dr. Zimbabwe, can you respond to some of those concerns, and considering 60% of the new voters are people under 40?
Our most recent research that was conducted by the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation and the Mass Public Opinion Institute and Afrobarometer noted clearly that the biggest issue in this election is jobs and jobs and jobs. And from our survey, the poll stated that more people believe that Nelson Chamisa could be the right person to give jobs to the desperate job seekers. So we are in a situation where there is no trust from our survey that ZANU-PF could turn around the economy and provide jobs as soon as people expect. And people are expecting something new. And our research clearly showed that Nelson Chamisa was leading Emerson Mnangagwa in terms of being the right person to create jobs.
Is that because so much of the old guard is still there, that they need to see a fresh face, that they've lost trust in a party that's led them into dire poverty?
I think it is evident that even from our research as well, there are very many new voters, and the voting structure in terms of the demographic structure is such that very many new and many youths are voting for the first time, and the biggest issue to them is employment. And if you would also look at the divide that we are going to see in this election, the rural-urban divide, it was also exemplified basically by how the presidential contestants Mnangagwa and Chamisa voted. Mnangagwa opted to go to vote in his rural home, while Chamisa voted in the urban areas where his strength is and where unemployment is higher, is mostly visible. So this issue of employment is one that is going to be the challenge of whoever is going to be declared winner, because it's an issue that is actually the albatross of the new government. Anyone who is an appointed president and does not provide employment to the rest of Zimbabweans, that could be the determinant of whether we are heading for a seriously a challenged situation economically, and also the security situation could be at stake when people become more and more desperate.
Yeah, I mean, what are the chances of social unrest at the moment, and what needs to be done in order to prevent that from happening?
I think the issue of employment and the government cannot be overemphasized. One other thing just to underscore is the fact that government does not create jobs. Government creates an enabling environment. Businesses, we know that Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of Southern Africa. The agriculture economy was big and was employing people. It collapsed. What do we need to do? What policies need to be in place? What incentives need to be in place to revive that sector? Manufacturing in Zimbabwe is collapsed. It's more expensive to manufacture anything that used to be manufactured in Zimbabwe than just importing it. So how do we build that sector?
Because you've got the minerals, you've got the talent, you've got the skills, haven't you? And I should imagine, going back to the youth, you need to keep them there, you need to nurture them, prevent them from leaving the country.
Yes, it's not just preventing them. How do you provide the right incentive for Zimbabwean diaspora? If you go to every country across Southern Africa, you go to North America, you go to Europe, you go to Australia, Zimbabweans left the country, not willfully, but because of the situation of the past regime of Robert Mugabe. So how do you begin to provide this incentive? Zimbabwe education system used to be a tough system across the whole African continent. People came from all over Africa to study. It's basically collapsed. Zimbabwe intelligentsia, academia have moved, migrated to South African universities, migrated to Australia. And how do you begin to build those systems, the health systems? So the government needs to be clear, they need to be decisive. Whoever is coming to replace Emerson as president needs to be decisive in terms of their marching orders to create this policy environment.
I should imagine a clear, positive picture. Dr. Vivian Atud and Dr. Zimbabwe, thank you both very much for talking to us. Now, Now, members of the news media covering Zimbabwe's new era been treated the same. Press from around the world say access and accreditation hasn't been a problem. But is it the same for members of the local media? Journalist for the Zimbabwe Independent, Admire Kudita, is with us live from Bulawayo. It's very good to have you with us. What is the status of the media at the moment, and focusing obviously on these elections? Have you been allowed to do your job?
Well, we have been largely allowed to do our job, but one sticking point for some of the journalists is the fact that the Electoral Act requires everyone to be accredited. But as far as we are concerned, we are accredited with ZMC, Zimbabwe Media Commission, and we're allowed to cover all functions in the state. So that creates a problem now. It's like double accreditation. Be that as it may be, people have had an opportunity to, if you are independent, if you are freelance, you write your own letter, and then it takes a week, and the name is sent from Harare for approval, and then you can go ahead and pay the $10 or $15 that is required for you to be accredited. But then there's a sticking point, another sticking point, where now in the vote counting, you can't come out once the vote counting starts. So which means you've got to stay the whole night. So which kind of like defeats the whole idea of accreditation in the first place, because then you can't move from station to station to see what the situation is like obtaining on the ground. And it's not really particular to just local journalists, but it goes for everyone. So, these are some of the things that are going on.
And what about reports that the international and the local media are being treated differently? Is that true? Can you confirm that? And what would the impact be there? Why would it be okay for an international journalist to get the news out and not for a local journalist?
No, I don't. Any of my colleagues, I haven't had that kind of feedback from any of my colleagues who are yet to experience that. I think we are even collaborating and cooperating with our comrades from across the borders. So that for me, it hasn't a reason.
Well, that's good news.
I wouldn't deny it for everyone else.
Okay, let's talk about the status of the media in the country and how you are allowed to operate or not until now. I mean, how much has changed in the last months?
Yeah, well, the fact of the matter is that there's been a lot of freedom of expression and freedom of association. Whether there will be freedom after expression is a moot point. The jury's still out on that one. But the reality on the ground is that people are able to, to move freely and gather and disseminate information as and when they feel that they can and they should.
But that hasn't always been the case, has it?
I beg your pardon?
That hasn't always been the case, has it?
No, definitely not. No. Under the regime of the deposed President Robert Mugabe, that was definitely not the case, because there was a lot of opaqueness, there was a lot of fear, and as a matter of fact, the Mass Public Opinion Institute survey in conjunction with Afrobarometer indicated that fear in Zimbabwe is higher than the average is higher than most other countries throughout the world. So that tells you something about the levels of insecurity that was obtaining in the country as a result of the brutal repression of the deposed President Robert Mugabe.
I should imagine it'll take quite a long time to convince journalists that they are safe and that they can really tell the story, and to also bring journalists who fled the country back into the country.
Yes, exactly. As I said, we do not know as yet whether there will be freedom after expression. One hopes that there's sincerity with our politicians to create an environment where the fourth estate is allowed to operate. Because, what we've experienced in Zimbabwe is that, some of the politicians who persecuted journalists when they were in power, once they were deposed, they sought journalists out so that they could tell their story. Now, which is kind of ironic. Now, everybody needs the press, but there's this suspicion and hatred for journalists, and people need to understand that the fourth estate is very, very critical in the progress of a civilized and modern society. When you suppress journalists, you're suppressing yourself, because the platform to speak and to air your views is exterminated in the process if you're not careful.
Admire, Kudita, very good
And
to talk
there's
to you
no checks and balances on power.
Absolutely. Media is important. Thanks for talking to us through the rather impressive changes there, that there is a little bit more freedom to speak the truth. Now, the eyes of the European Union keeping watch over the vote. Tonight, their lead observer joins us to talk about what his team saw on the ground, and that's coming up in a short while.